Okay, good afternoon once again to all of you. So, this is just the continuation of the topic that I've discussed to you last meeting. Noong una, diniscuss ko po sa inyo is the difference between two means for the large independent sample. And now, so didiscuss ni teacher sa inyo mga anak yung small independent samples naman. Okay? So, yung pinagkaiba ng dalawa, so kapag large independent, so ibig sabihin po nun, that is a z-test distribution. At the same time, the sample size na ginagamit natin doon is greater than or equal to 30. So kapag small independent sample naman po, so dito po papasok si t-test distribution. Ang sample size naman po na gagamitin po natin is less than 30. So still the same. We're just going to get the differences between the two sample means. Okay. So this is the procedure for the t-test for independent sample. So kung mapapansin nyo naman, wala naman po siyang pinagkaiba doon sa z-test po for independent. Okay? Siyempre dito on the t-test, meron pong nadagdag na part which is yung pagkuha ng degree of freedom. Okay? So ulitin ko lang po sa inyo yung step-by-step procedure natin. So on step number 1, we will be setting up the hypothesis and then identifying the claim. So, ganun pa rin naman po yung paggamit natin. We just need to be careful on the signs na gagamitin po natin for the hypothesis. It should be accurate doon po sa mga questions na may encountered po natin. Okay? So, dito po kasi sa science po, malalaman din natin mga anak kung anong tailed po ba siya. If it's a one-tailed or a two-tailed test. So after nun, step number 2, which is for the level of significance, and then we're going to calculate the degree of freedom. So sa degree of freedom, ito po yung magiging formula po natin. So dalawa na po yung sample size na makikita po ninyo since this is for two sample po. Okay, so first sample size plus the second sample size, and then subtract lang po tayo ng 2. And that would be the degree of freedom. After nun, okay, meron na tayong step number 1, meron tayong step number 2, we can proceed on determining or identifying the critical value po. Okay, yung gagamitin po natin na table po dito is yung color brown po, and kung paano po natin siya ginamit before on the one sample t-test, so ganun din po. Okay, we're going to identify first kung anong tail po siya, and then titignan natin yung row po nila, kung anong level of significance naman yung gagamitin, and then yung degree of freedom. Pagtatapatin lang natin yon, and yun na po yung magiging critical value po natin. On step number 4, in case pa rin naman po to, so depende pa rin po to dun sa magiging scenario po natin. In any case, if the sample mean and then the sample variance was not given, so hahanapin muna natin sila. Okay, bago tayo mag-proceed doon sa t-test for independent or the t-test computed po. Okay, kung given naman na po sila, we can already substitute the data or the given that we have directly po doon po sa formula po ni t-test po. Okay? And then after po niyan, since we already find the t-test and then we already have the critical value, we're going to compare them and then we will be having the decision. Okay, so makikita nyo naman po yan dito that if the t computed is less than the critical value, then we're going to accept the null hypothesis. And then if ever that the t computed is greater than or equal to the critical value that we have, okay, we're going to reject the null hypothesis. And then after nun, the last part or the last step na gagawin po natin is to state our conclusion. Okay? So this will be the formulas that we will be using for this topic po. So meron tayong dalawa. Unang-una, if the variances is assumed to be unequal. Okay, so ito po yung formula na gagamitin po natin. Okay, dito rin sa variances that assume are to be unequal, sorry. Okay, yung degree of freedom po are equal to the smaller. Okay, so ayan po yung magiging degree of freedom po natin. And then, for the second formula that we can use if the variances naman po is assumed to be equal, ito naman po siya. Okay? So the number of degrees naman po or of freedom in the test is the total number of items sampled minus the number of sample groups, or in short, ito po yung nakita nyo kanina na formula for the degree of freedom kanina po doon sa procedure po na pinakita ko po sa inyo. Okay? So on this topic mga anak, itong example na ibibigay ko po sa inyo is puro assume to be equal po muna tayo. Okay? So let's start with example number one. So a researcher wishes to determine, okay, whether the monthly salary of a professional elementary teachers in private schools and elementary teachers in public schools differs. So meron daw po bang pinagkaiba yung monthly salary ng dalawa? Okay, he select a sample of elementary teachers at the same time for the public teachers din po. Okay, at the level of significance of 0.01, can be concluded that the private schools teachers does not receive the same salary with the public school teachers. Okay, then assume that the population are approximately normally distributed. So yung pinakatanong dito mga anak is kung totoo ba daw na hindi pareho ang sahod ng private school teachers sa public school teachers. Okay, so we have here the data. As you can see, the sample mean, the standard deviation was given, and also the sample size. Okay, so umpisahan natin kay private po muna. So on private, meron tayong sample mean na 16,400. For the standard deviation, we have 700. And then the sample size is equal to 15. Okay, for the public school teachers, we have the sample mean of 15,170. Standard deviation is 800. And then the sample size is 9. So dito mga anak, since given naman na yung dalawa, so hindi na tayo maghahanap, hindi na natin sila i-compute, we're going to proceed already on the computation po ng t-test computed po natin. But before we go there, so let's have first the step number one, which is we're going to state the hypothesis and then identifying the claim. So yung pinakatanong dito is does not receive the same salary. So ibig sabihin po niyan, pag does not receive the same salary, ibig sabihin they are not equal to. Okay? So meron pong pagkakaiba. So ang magiging claim natin dito on the first example will be the alternative hypothesis. And the sign that we will be using is not equal. Okay, ibig sabihin yan, there will be a significant difference between the monthly salaries po ng private tsaka ng public elementary teachers po. Okay? Since here on the alternative, the sign that we use is not equal, so the inverse of it is equal. And yun po yung magiging null hypothesis po natin. For step number two, we will be having the level of significance, which is 0.01, as stated on the word problem itself. And then the degree of freedom is equal to 22. Okay? So, meron tayong sample size sa buwan, which is 15. Add lang po natin sa 9, and then subtract po ng 2. 15 plus 9 is equal to 24. Minus 2, we will be having the degree of freedom of 22 po. Okay? So, dito pa lang sa step number 1, step number 2, okay, ito na po yung mga kakailanganin natin for us to identify, okay, kung ano po yung magiging critical value po nito. Okay? So, makikita natin na two-tailed po ang gagamitin natin na test since equal tsaka not equal yung sign na ginamit po natin. Okay, we already have the level of significance and then the degree of freedom. Okay? So, yung critical value natin mga anak dito will be positive and then negative 2.819. So, I want you to look on your table. So, hanapin nyo dun sa table na color brown yung two-tailed, and then check nyo yung row na yon, 0.01, the level of significance. I think it was located on the very last column or on the very last part ng row na iyon. And then, hanapin nyo yung 22 doon sa degrees of freedom, and then pagtapatin po natin sila. Okay, kailangan po ito po ang makukuha din ninyong critical value. Positive, negative, 2.819. Sir, ulitin lang namin bakit po may positive and then negative. Since we will be using a two-tailed test, so kailangan both sides nung normal curve natin, meron pong critical region, and then we have the representation for the positive side or for the right-tailed, and then negative side which is on the left tail. Okay? So after nyo yan magawang step 1, step 2, step 3, we will be proceeding on step number 4. So just like what I said a while ago, since the given or the sample mean and then the standard deviation is already given, so diretso na po tayo ng computation po nung t-test po natin or the test value. Okay? So the formula that we will be using will be the second one. We will be assuming that the variances are equal. So ito po yung formula na gagamitin po natin. Okay? So wag pong ma-overwhelm ng babahagya dito sa formula. I know it's very confusing na kasi masyadong mahaba na yung formula na gagamitin natin dito. But just take time to observe it on your part. So tignan nyo lang na mabuti. All we have to do lang naman dito is to substitute. So once na na-substitute naman na natin ito, so we can do the basic operation, or if you wanted to, you can input it on your calculator directly ng dire-diretso. But again, be careful on the use of the parenthesis po. Okay? So we have here the difference of the two sample mean minus the difference of the population mean. Kapag, again ha, kung wala pong given sa example or on the word problem yung population mean, okay, automatic the value will be 0. Okay, divided into the first square root. Okay, so sample size minus 1, and then multiply to the sample variance since naka-squared po ito, plus the n sub 2 or the second sample size minus 1 again, and then the sample variance for the second group divided to the degree of freedom. Okay, and then another square root of 1 divided for the first sample size plus 1 divided to the second sample size. Okay, so substitute lang natin lahat ng data po na meron tayo. So for the sample mean, we have 16,400 minus 15,170. Okay, the first sample size is 15 minus 1. And then kung ano po yung standard deviation niya on that group, so that's 700, yun po yung gagamitin natin. And then don't forget the square. Okay, since standard deviation lang po yung given, so wag niyo pong kakalimutan na lagyan po ng squared doon po sa computation po natin. Plus, okay, on the second group, we have 9 minus 1 multiplied to 800, which is the standard deviation also. And then again, don't forget the square. Okay, divided into the degree of freedom, which is 15 plus 9 minus 2. And then another square root. Okay, to 1 over 15 plus 1 over 9. Okay, so once po na na-input nyo na po yan sa calculator po ninyo, kailangan po ang answer po natin is 3.953. Okay, here on step number 4 for the test of value or getting the t computed, always round off your answer. Okay, in 3 decimal places kasi po i-compare natin siya doon sa critical value natin. Okay, so we already have the t-test computed, so we can already have decision na po. Okay, so we're just going to compare the critical value and then the t-test computed. So ito po yung magiging illustration ko for this example. So as you can see mga anak, both sides naman nung normal curve natin is meron tayong critical value which is negative 2.819 and then positive 2.819. Okay? Since mga anak, the t-test computed, okay, is greater than doon sa critical value natin. So, ibig sabihin po niyan, nandito po siya banda. Okay? Magfo-fall po siya doon sa shaded area po natin. And once na nasa shaded area ka, ibig sabihin nun, nandun ka sa critical region. And if that happen, mga anak, okay, if the t-test computed is lying on the critical region itself, we need to reject the null hypothesis. Okay? So, rejected po yung null hypothesis natin dito. So, step number 6, we will be having a conclusion. So, sa conclusion, syempre, magbe-base tayo dito sa decision. And then, let's see for our claim. Since there is enough, on my conclusion, since we reject the null hypothesis, there will be enough evidence to support the claim that the salaries paid to elementary teachers employed in private are different with public school teachers. Ibig sabihin po nun, yung tinatanong po dito na magkaiba daw po ba ng sahod yung private tsaka yung public, totoo po. Okay, so makikita naman natin dyan, based sa data na meron tayo, napatunayan po natin na magkaiba po talaga sila ng monthly salary po. Okay, so that would be the complete solution for the example number 1. Do you have question po ba on example number 1? Yes, Luella? Sure, anak. What do you mean anak sa squared? Ito yung 700 tsaka 800? Ah, it, square root. Okay, this is square root, anak ha. Yes, anak, you're going to multiply the answer po after nyo siyang makuha. Okay, so kukuhain natin itong square root muna nito, itong part na ito. And then if we already have the answer, and then square root din natin itong nasa loob nito, and then multiply lang natin yung dalawa. Thank you so much, anak. Yeah, dito sa part na to mga anak, I highly recommend na wag nyo siyang idiretso. Kung hindi po tayo familiar ha, I mean, kung hindi naman po natin parang kaya talaga, I mean, trial na tayo ng try din, hindi pa rin natin makuha yung exact value, pwede naman natin siya mga anak unti-untiin. Okay, so sagutan muna natin yung numerator, and then input natin yung makukuha nating answer, and then tsaka tayo proceed dito sa denominator na ito muna yung kukuhain natin, then yung answer susulat natin, and then another square root answer, tsaka natin mo multiply. But I highly recommend mga anak kapag ganun po yung ginawa natin, kung ilang decimal point po yung makikita natin sa calculator, yun din po dapat yung exact value na ilalagay nyo po. Okay? Huwag po muna tayo mag-round off agad dito pa lang while computing pa lang ha. Huwag tayong mag-round off agad para po eksakto pong 3.953 yung makukuha po nating answer. Pag nag-round off kasi tayo mga anak agad, kunyari ay sobrang haba naman ng decimal place nito so parang nakakatamad isulat. Uh, nag-round off kay agad. So, there will be a uh, konting difference po sa makukuha po nating answer. Okay? Although, kapag nag-round off kayo, very little lang naman yung magiging difference, but we need to get the, excuse me, the exact answer po talaga. So, kailangan ganun po kapag kahit gaano pa yung kahaba, isulat natin and then tsaka natin po mag-round off dun na po sa pinaka final answer. Okay? Any question pa po regarding on this example? Wala naman na? Okay. So, thank you so much. So, yun yung kabuaang computation or solution on this example number 1. Okay, example number 2. On example number two, we have here the budget head for SSS Sales Incorporation would like to compare the daily travel expenses for their sales staff and then for their audit staff. Okay, he collected the following sample information which is shown dyan po sa gilid, yung naka-table po na blue. At the 0.05 level of significance, can we conclude that the mean daily expenses of sales staffs are greater than the audit staff. So, yun yung gusto nating patunayan na kung totoo ba daw na mas malalaki or mas malaki yung expenses ng sales kaysa po dun sa audit staff nila. Okay? So, mapapansin nyo rin dito mga anak, walang masyadong given na binigay. Ang meron lang dyan, yung data or the information base po dun sa ginawa po nilang survey, and then yung level of significance. Wala tayong makikitang sample mean, walang standard deviation. So, on this example number 2, kailangan natin silang hanapin mamaya. So let's proceed first on step number 1 by stating the hypothesis and then the claim. So since meron kayong makikitang hint dito mga anak na greater than, okay, ibig sabihin nun, yan po yung sign na gagamitin natin. And the word greater than or the sign greater than will fall on the alternative hypothesis. Okay? So greater than din siya, ibig sabihin yan, one-tailed siya, specifically nasa right portion po or right-tailed po nung normal curve po natin. So, syempre, kung greater than po yung ginamit natin for the alternative hypothesis, for the null hypothesis is just the inverse, which is less than or equal to. Okay? Next step is the level of significance, which is 0.05. And then the degree of freedom, which is 12 plus 9 is equal to 21, minus 2 is equal to 19. Sir, saan mo nakuha yung 12 tsaka yung 9? Wala po kaming nakikitang ganyang number dyan po sa word problem natin. Nakuha ko po tong 12 tsaka 9 nung binilang ko po yung data po na meron tayo. Since ito lang po yung ito lang po yung information na meron po tayo, so bibilangin lang natin siya. Like for the sales staff, so meron tayong 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So kaya po meron akong 12 dyan. And then for the audit staff, since tatlo naman yung blanco sa table, 12 minus 3 is equal to 9. Kaya po, doon ko po nakuha yung 12 tsaka yung 9 po. Then after nyan, since we already know kung ilang tail siya, meron na rin tayong level of significance, meron na rin tayong degree of freedom. Okay, step number 3 is to determine the critical region or the critical value. Okay? So, ganun pa rin yung paggamit natin mga anak. So, one-tailed siya. Tignan natin sa table. Hanapin natin sa row niya yung 0.05. And then after nun, tignan natin yung degrees of freedom, which is 19. Pagtapatin natin, ito po yung makukuha po natin. Okay, we will be having the critical value of 1.729. Okay, try nyo rin yan mga anak tignan sa part po ninyo. Kailangan po yan din po yung makukuha ninyo na critical region. So after nyan, ayan, so step 1, 2, 3, we are already done. Since wala nga, sinabi ko nga po kanina, wala yung sample mean, wala yung standard deviation or variance, wala pong given na ganon. So, kailangan muna natin silang hanapin on step number 4. So, una kong hahanapin mga anak is sample mean. So, since dalawa pong grupo ang meron tayo, kailangan ko rin po ng dalawang sample mean, tapos dalawang variance po. So this will be the first sample mean for the sales staff. So all we have to do is to get the summation of all the data that we have, which is magkakaroon tayo ng 1,755. So ito yung pang sa sales. Okay? Divided po sa number ng value na meron tayo, which is 12. And then, this will be the answer. So, we will be having 146.25. Okay? For the second sample mean, for the audit staff, so add lang natin lahat ng meron po tayong information. And ang answer po is 915. Divided natin yan sa number of value na meron tayo, which is 9. Ang answer po na makukuha is 101.67. Okay? So, meron na tayong dalawang sample mean. After nyan, okay, ang hahanapin na natin is sample variance. So, sa sample variance, ito po yung formula na gagamitin po natin. Okay? So, kukuhain daw natin yung summation nung squared ni x minus sample mean. And ginagawa naman na natin yan before. So, you already know how to get it. Pero papakita ko pa rin po sa inyo yung table. So, ayan po yung dalawang sample variance na nakuha ko po. So, ito yung computation na ginawa ko po para po dyan sa sample variance natin. So, alam kong very challenging uh, kapag hindi po given yung sample variance and then the sample mean kasi we need to create this kind of table po mga anak. Okay? So, mapapansin nyo dito, itong first column, this is for the sales staff, yung information po na meron tayo kanina. And then, yung pangalawang column, that is for the audit staff. And then, itong una mga anak, ito yung difference at the same time, naka-squared na rin po ito nung sinubtract ko po yung value doon sa sample mean po natin kanina. So, kagaya dito, so let's say 105 minus po dun sa sample mean na nakuha ko na 146.25 and then in-squared ko na po siya diretso kaya ito na po yung magiging answer niya. Okay? So, ito na po yung pang sales. Ganun din po yung ginawa ko for the audit. So, sinubtract ko lang din itong mga value na ito doon sa sample mean na nakuha ko po kanina and then naka-squared na rin po siya. Okay? Pag nakuha na po natin itong dalawang column na ito, so kuhain na natin yung summation. Kasi yan yung kakailanganin natin para po doon sa pagkuha ng sample variance po natin. So, tandaan nyo, ito yung nakuha ko for the first group which is on the sales, 9,056.25 while for the audit staff naman po, meron tayong 12,300. So, balik lang ako dun sa kaninang slide. So, sinubstitute ko lang mga anak ay ang nakuha kong mga data or yung summation. So, ito na po siya. So, 9,056.25 divided po natin yan sa 11. Ito po yung magiging first sample variance natin. Sa pangalawa naman, 12,300 divided sa 8. And then, ito po yung makukuha na sagot, which is 1,537.5. So, kompleto na po. Okay? Yung kakailanganin natin para po mahanap yung t-test computed po natin. So, puntahan natin na or let's compute na po yung t-test computed. So, ayan po yung gagawin natin. So, substitute lang po natin. Kung mapapansin niyo mga anak, wala nang squared. Okay? Sir, oo nga, bakit wala nang squared? Kasi po, yung ginawa po natin kanina, that was already the computation or the value nung sample variance po natin. Okay? So, automatic, kung ano yung nakuha natin kanina doon sa sample variance, yun na lang po yung i-input natin. And wala na pong squared. Kasi naka-squared na rin po yan doon. Okay, doon kasi sa example number 1, kaya may nakita pa kayong squared dito sa loob ng, sa taas ng, dito, ito, particular na tinuturo ko mga anak. Kasi po, yung given naman natin doon sa example number 1 is just for the standard deviation. So, para makuha natin yung variance, kailangan naka-squared po siya. Okay? So, ganun ulit gagawin natin dito mga anak. So, input lang ng data, substitute lang natin, and then, ang answer po dapat is positive 3.015. Okay? So, yan dapat po yung makukuha natin na value po. So, ganun din. So, kung hindi natin kakayanin na idiretso doon sa ano po, sa calculator, utay-utayin natin siya. So, sagutan muna natin yung numerator and then follow with the denominator and then tsaka po tayo mag-conduct or mag-finalize ng answer. Again, during those process na kung saan unti-untiin natin sila, huwag po muna tayo mag-round off. So, mag-round off lang tayo doon na po sa pinaka-final answer. Okay? And then after nyan, syempre decision making, yan yung illustration ko. So, ito yung critical value na nakuha po kanina, which is 1.729. And then dito po banda, yung t-test computed natin. So, since greater than pa din siya mga anak, so mas mataas yung t-test computed natin kumpara doon sa critical value natin, ibig sabihin po nun, we're going to reject the null hypothesis. Okay? And then for the conclusion, since we reject it, okay, ibig sabihin din po nun, there is enough evidence po to support our claim that the daily travel expenses for sales staff is greater than sa audit staff po. So yan po yung whole solution for example number 2.